All right, a very important topic today. I'd say this morning, but first off, it's 1:22 a.m., so that's the middle of the night for most people, but you're probably not watching this in the morning. Anyway, the topic is female power and potential, differences in female value in the eyes of the world and a good man. So this is a nice presentation, in my opinion, in terms of the value of the topics discussed here. They're immensely valuable. I think I'm going to cross-list this under both the playlist for men and the playlist for women. If you don't use those playlists, I encourage you to do so. It might take you to a video that would be lost to you otherwise. I do take some time to try to put those into playlists. And if you have any suggestions for some that should be included that aren't, or new playlist ideas, just let me know either in the comments, which I do read, or you can always email me at upwardthought@gmail.com. So let's start with some definitions around this concept of power. It's a word that's used by different people in different ways, especially today. So when I say power, what I mean is the ability to achieve, obtain, and retain what you want. I think that's worthy of additional thought, so I hope you crunch on that a little bit. Power as the ability to achieve, obtain, and retain what you want. It's not a morally charged concept. It's a tool that you can use one way or the other, but it's very different than what people think in the common expressions that use it. Then we've got this word allure, which is a very interesting word. The root lure is the same word that we use to define or refer to, I guess, bait. When you go fishing, you have a lure. What are the qualities of a lure? That not all bait is a lure. So you can use a living fish for bait or a dead fish, and that does not count as a lure if you read fishing regulations. Why? Because it's real. See, fish are attracted to other fish to eat them, and if you're using a real fish, that's not a lure, a lure with a space between. It's a lure has to be false. That's very important. So, allure is the use of the human tendency to impute virtue in the place of unknown attributes. That might be a little wordy to some, so let's break it down. Allure is when you use the tendency people have to assume that unknown attributes must be positive. Now, that assumption is not universal. So in some cases, we assume the worst in people. So for example, if we already know that they support an ideology that we do not, or that they're different than us in whatever way, we will assume the worst in people by default, naturally. But when we want something from someone that we think they can give us, we will assume the best in them. When we see someone as a part of our crowd or like us in some way, or we want to be with them, we will assume the best in them. Just like when you're contemplating a decision, if the option is something you already want to do, you will find all kinds of reasons to do it. This has been well studied. Daniel Kahn has done a lifetime of work on this sort of thing. But if you don't like the idea, you will come up with all kinds of reasons for why. But those aren't your actual reasons. It's post hoc. You do it after the fact. So when a man sees a woman that he finds attractive, he will come up with all of these things about her that you couldn't possibly know just by looking at her. and there will be all these assumptions about it. This has been well studied. Attractive women are ranked as more intelligent by people who know nothing else about them, for example, right? So, and the same thing happens the reverse way, by the way. So attractive men also have positive assumptions made about them. And then we've got this word potential. Potential is value that exists in possibility, but not actuality. It has not come into reality. It's just something that could be. All right. Now here's a statement, an axiom, if you will. A woman's power to attract men comes from allure and or potential. A woman's power to attract men comes from allure and or potential. This is the nexus of everything we're going to talk about in this presentation. Now, that power to attract men is very different than power to retain men. A woman's power to retain men comes from actuality. Now, in society today, with all the tools in play, including the culture, but technology and wealth, and all the things humans have used them for, women have unprecedented power to attract men. They also have unprecedentedly, I can't say that word, unprecedentedly low power to retain men. So what has happened on a historical basis is the power women have to attract men has exploded, and the power women have to retain men has decayed to almost nothing. And we will explain why in this presentation. So hopefully that baits you. Hopefully it's not allure. There's real content here. Hopefully it's potential. Okay, so before we get further, I want to introduce a concept that I call the divine goddess. Someone else may have coined this term. I don't know. I'm not using it from anyone else as far as I know, unless I've forgotten that I learned this from someone else, or that the seed of this came from somewhere else. I have no idea. But I think this is all through me here. But I call this concept the divine goddess. So we need to introduce some more definitions. Divine means something like God. And goddess, divine's a funny word. It's one of many words we use all the time. But if you said, well, what does this mean? People would just scratch their head and say, well, I'd have to think about that. I'm not even really sure. Or they just blurt out something that's totally wrong. So divine means something like God. And what does goddess mean? A woman who is adored. So divine goddess is not a duplicate redundancy. It's a woman who is adored because she's something like God. Now, I'm going to give you a little cheat code for life. The only reason to ever adore anything is its similarity to God. If you adore it more than that, it's called idolatry. That's the definition of idolatry, actually. Okay, let's keep rolling. So, who is the divine goddess? And that's a weird question because it makes me think we're going to point to one woman and say, there she is. But actually, the question is how. In other words, what is she like? Because, and this is a glorious thing, divine goddess is not an assignment, it's a quality. And it's a quality that any woman can choose to obtain. That's a glorious thing. That is her divine investiture as a creation in the image of God, a female creation in the image of God. And as men, we have a masculine equivalent of that is different and also valuable. That's our divine investiture as men created in the image of God. And we will also talk about that. So, what is the divine goddess like? The divine goddess is a woman who is worthy of every sacrifice that the ideal man could make for her. The divine goddess is a woman who is worthy of every sacrifice the ideal man could make for her. This is an abundantly rich statement. Because encoded in it is this concept of the ideal man, which is not defined here, but it imposes many constraints on what that every sacrifice might mean, what that consists in and of, and what it would take for a woman to be worthy of that. Now, worthy is a word we should have defined, because that's another one like divine that people use all the time and they have no idea what it means. It means to incur a debt, to deserve something, because you've already paid for it. To be worthy of something is to merit it because you've already paid the price. That is the dictionary definition. So we're defining words, and I guess I'm going to make them up too. I'll try to talk more clearly here. Jeez. So the divine goddess is a woman who's worthy of every sacrifice the ideal man could make for her. Now, I'm going to read this to you. It's on the slide. The divine goddess provides greater meaning than anyone else could to the ideal man. So that's to say that this is not a question of trivial value to the man. This is meaning. It's the deepest of the deep. The divine goddess will perceive, receive, appreciate, and live all the value that the ideal man provides. As a result, she has greater joy and a higher impact on the world than she could have any other way. And this provides the ideal man with greater joy than he could have in any other way. I strongly encourage you to replay this and every other portion of this presentation again and again and again until you get what I'm saying, because these are very concise and rich and intentional statements. And they're very, very different than what the world has taught you. This paragraph, though, which maybe I'll read again, is like a sticky glue trap, like flypaper, or sometimes they use them for spiders or mice. Anything crossing this is going to get stuck in it, but in the best of ways. So whatever you think the value of a woman is, it is maximized in the concept of the divine goddess. And that is a quality of all things that come from God, is that they grow and get better and better. The more you lean into them, the better they get. The harder life becomes, the more valuable what comes from God becomes. And you just see the value of it pouring out and expanding forever. And that's what the definition of the divine goddess is as well. It's like that. So let me read it again. I'll read both bullets. The divine goddess is a woman who is worthy of every sacrifice the ideal man could make for her. And I'll cut to the chase. Who's the ideal man? It's God. Jesus Christ showed what the ideal man in mortality looks like. That was one of the main purposes of his life. And so, what is every sacrifice that the ideal man could make? It's everything Jesus did. Okay, the divine goddess provides greater meaning than anyone else could to the ideal man. The divine goddess will perceive, receive, appreciate, and live all the value the ideal man provides. The result is that she has greater joy and a higher impact on the world than she could have any other way, which provides the ideal man with greater joy than he could have in any other way. So one topic that comes up from time to time is the difference between the value that a man can receive from another man versus the value a man can receive from a woman. And then you could reverse that as well, the value a woman receives from any other woman and the value a woman receives from a man. Those frameworks are very different, and the potentials are very different. The actualities vary considerably depending on which individuals we're talking about, but the capacity, the potential, the ideal of each, it's very different. And so this is one of the unique ideal contributions of a woman, is the meaning she will provide could provide, I should say, in her ideal state to the ideal man. And this introduces some very interesting questions about Jesus, which we're not going to address in this presentation. But if the divine goddess provides greater meaning than anyone else can to the ideal man, and the ideal man is Jesus, is or was there an ideal woman? And who is she, or was she? And exactly how did she provide the greatest meaning to Jesus? Because when we think of Jesus and his meaning, we think of the whole world. But is there, was there, will there be a woman, an actual woman, a mortal woman who fulfills this role for Jesus? That's a very interesting question. So now let's step away from the perfect example and talk about us. So I want to now transition to this idea of the assumption of the divine goddess. And we're going to go back to definitions. So the word assumption, it's got two meanings, and they're very different from each other. The first meaning is a thing supposed or taken without proof, and that's probably where your mind goes when you hear the word assumption, like let's assume. So the second definition, though, it's less commonly used, but it's still known by a lot of people and practiced, used, I guess. And that is an undertaking or thing taken upon oneself, like to assume a burden. So it turns out that you can apply both of those definitions to the concept of the divine goddess. And the one definition is what men do. The other definition is what women ought to do. What men do and shouldn't do. What men do but shouldn't, and what women should but don't. Okay? All right, so for men, the assumption of the divine goddess describes the fact that they're attracted to women based on the woman's ability to sustain their delusion about female actuality. So parse through that with me. The assumption of the divine goddess for a man is the fact that men are attracted to women based on how well that woman can sustain his delusion in the actual value of women. And actual, I mean, as the opposite of potential. So in other words, men are attracted to women that fool them the best. Allure. Allure. Now, this is a corruption of a virtuous desire, as all sin is, actually. That's a nugget, but it is true. Okay, all men, we instinctively yearn. There's something very deep inside of us that calls us towards the divine goddess. We want to find not just a woman like this, we want to see it as a universal reality. There's something deep inside of us that calls us towards this. And I could zoom in and talk all about it, but we're just going to keep rolling. But if you saw the connections, you'd see that this is a web that fills the life of every man. And it's a great thing that it does, because it's really an indescribable portion of what we consider to be life, the universe, and everything rolls on these gears. There's a statement of importance for you. Okay, what about for women? So the problem isn't that men are attracted to the divine goddess. It's that that desire is corrupted into being attracted to the ones that fool them the best, instead of actually finding the real ones. And of course, no man has ever thought through these things and described them this way. Okay, so don't think that, until now, don't think that this is the calculus going on in every man's mind from moment to moment. It's very much an instinctual thing. It's thoughtless. And because of that, it's not done very well. And that's one reason for the corruption. Not the only reason. Now, for women, the assumption of the divine goddess is the call to become this way, for real. It's the call to translate the vast potential into actuality. And we don't have a slide on this, but we could go through the opposite with the divine God, which is the masculine version. And that's the call to become like God for a man. And there's also a female corruption of that, which tends to be everything you find in modern Christianity, to put it in a nutshell. But to oversimplify, it's things like finding security in stability, which is what modern Christian churches use to bait women. That's why there are more women than men in modern churches, is because they've highlighted and twisted all the parts of the gospel that promise women everything they ever could have wanted in exchange for absolutely nothing in return. And boy, is that an easy sale to make. That's not what they promise men, or rather they do promise the world to men, but they don't deliver it in a way that can sustain their delusion. Modern churches are expert at sustaining the delusions of women. They're terrible at sustaining the delusions of men. They're good at promising both exactly what they want to hear. But they are not able to sustain the delusions of men very well. Only some kinds of men, a subset. Whereas almost every woman. That's an overstatement. I retract that remark. Many more women than men. That's true. There are whole classes of women that will stay miles and miles away from any church that is like that. Okay, which is all of them. Except for the one true church, which isn't a church at all. Okay, the corruption of the divine goddess. So now we've talked briefly a little about the ideal, but let's talk about the corruption of the ideal. And so this is what men desire, worldly men desire in a woman. And this is how the inherent and holy desire toward the divine goddess that every man has is corrupted into something that will never lead to its fulfillment. Never. So here's that corruption. It's this twisted idea that the divine goddess is an eternally youthful beauty who answers every desire of a man. And that's basically it. This is someone who will always be just as attractive as I imagine her to currently be. Those words are carefully chosen. So, and she will always be exactly what I want in every moment. Yeah, that's not an impossible standard, huh? quite interesting too, not to get on too much of a side note because there's so much depth to it, but the idea of a woman being a helpmeet for man, boy, I mentioned modern churches, but one of the giant perversions that they sell is the idea that that means equal partner. And it means something very different than that. In best terms, it means a complementary opposite. A complementary opposite. But if you dig just a little deeper, you'll find that it's more something like exactly the kind of person that would generate the greatest growth by providing the greatest challenges. Which doesn't sound so nice, right? It is nice. It's the best, in fact, if you have a godly attitude towards things. But anyway, my point with bringing that up is that the corruption of the divine goddess points to pretty much the opposite of what would be best. Because if you had a woman as a wife who was exactly what you desired in the moment you desired it, and nothing else ever, that is not a helpmeet for you. That would be a person that would not lead you to any kind of improvement. And that's not the kind of person you'd want to be with if what you were here for was a growth experience. That's the kind of person you would want to be with after you grew. Because at that point, you could actually enjoy and value what she has to offer. And hopefully, that would be in a state where you both were pointing in the same direction. And therefore, you were that for each other. And that's the missing link, is the fact that now you are the same thing for each other. It's balanced. It's not just a one-way street of gimme, 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 gimme. We're both giving all the time the very things that we would like to receive, and it's complementary, right? So it's interesting that you become the complement through hashing out the fact or contending with the fact that you are the complement. You are very different. And it's through those differences that the differences come to be a unity. Anyway, I could get deep. Maybe it just did. So let's just back off into easier language and thoughts here. So parsing through this corruption of the divine goddess, this is a woman who never ages, right? So right off the bat, it's impossible. She wants to talk whenever, but also only when the man wants to listen. So it's not enough to want to talk, and it's not enough to not want to talk. It's just exactly how and when he wants it. And you go through the list, and it's the same for her listening. So like there are times when he doesn't want her to listen. He just wants to vent and say, turn off the recorder, and I never want to hear about this again, and you can't use it against me at a later date, but I'm just going to say what I feel without thinking. And I just want to do that right now. And also, when he doesn't want to talk, he doesn't want her upset that he doesn't want to talk. He just wants to be left alone right now, right? And you could go through the same thing with recreation, with resting, with eating, with sleeping, with sex, with anything. That's, I want what I want, and I don't want what I want, and I'm free to change my mind at any moment, and you just need to be exactly what I want at all times. And of course, this is an absolutely absurd desire. It's not good at all for any reason. So often, men reduce all of this complex, twisted corruption into a specific facet, like one spoke on a wheel. And, that's like thinking of a wife as a nanny, or a wife as a prostitute, or a wife as a maid, or a wife as a cook. And so none of these things even scratch the surface on what is actually valuable in a woman. And maybe this is as good a point to bring it up as any. When I speak about these things, I was going to try to speak in generalities and say when people say this or that, but you know, whatever motives other people have, that's on them. And the things they say or don't say, whatever. But as for me, it's deeply troubling when I hear people misrepresent what I have to say about women and men because they correctly tune into the fact that I have absolute disregard for the concepts they have of the value of women and men. I dispute those ideas, and I think there are very solid, easy to see reasons for that contention. However, in every single instance where I have, in my opinion, correctly pointed out less value in things that people see as valuable in women and men, I have always pointed to something that I have reasons to believe, which I share, that is much more valuable than that, than what was originally introduced. And so, criticizing aspects of gender does not equal not valuing that gender. And we do this on both sides of the coin. And yes, I do believe it's a two-sided coin, if that was up for dispute. So, here's an example. What we just went through, I mean, this whole presentation is just like, how can anybody even hear a slice of this and then accuse me or anyone who says these things or things like this of being a misogynist? I don't understand, unless you're using a very different definition of the term, which most of them are. They just mean anything that criticizes women. It doesn't matter if the criticism's true. It doesn't matter if you're pointing to other things of greater value in its place that are equally, uniquely feminine. Whatever. Okay, so that's out of the way. Now let's zoom in a little bit on this idea of allure. Now the title says a woman's power allure. That's abbreviated. You can only fit so many words in there. Power to attract men. Okay? Power to attract men. And it's worldly men at that. But that is almost all men, so. So how do women maximize this? They're very good at it. Modern women, like I said, it's one thing that has certainly improved over time is their ability to attract worldly men. How? They're very good at hiding their worst qualities. Now, that's not always intentional. I've talked about this in other videos. I do believe that a woman is the most excited she'll ever be in her life on a first date. By and large, if you're rounding, right? Averaging it out, it only goes downhill from there. And it's because potential becomes actuality, and actuality hardly ever measures up. So, okay, no harm, no foul, right? So if someone is as excited as they're going to be or anything close to it, obviously they're going to be on their best behavior. It's never going to get easier to look good, right? When you're super happy and excited and everything's potential, you're going to be on your best. But when you haven't slept for 8 months because an infant's been crying, or you're going through menopause or something, life's not going to be as easy, right? Or you're dealing with tragedy or whatever. So how else do they do it? Well, by augmenting their qualities. There is a very long list of things that are on this, and we can't go over them all, but just some simple examples are makeup and clothing. So I'm not saying women should not wear makeup, and I'm not saying they should go around naked, but, or even just, dress like you're Amish or something. That's totally independent of anything I'm saying. I'm just stating that this is a thing, not making a comment on whether it's good or bad or we should do something else or anything like that. Although I will make a comment that I think that no one should ever wear fake eyelashes or wear boyfriend jeans. I think that those two things are absurd, and I'm not sure why anyone thinks they're a good idea, but we'll just throw that out there. Take it for what it's worth. Now back to the regular scheduled program here. Um, yeah, well, I'm trying not to rant about that. Okay. So clothing that's body augmenting, and makeup itself, and maybe this is actually, these are valid things to bring up with the eyelashes and the boyfriend jeans. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum on this, but there's a difference between accentuating something and replacing it, right? And if you cross the line of, from suspension of disbelief to pure illusion, it, no one has foot-long eyelashes. It's just, it, once what you're showing doesn't exist at all, like the whole point of makeup and body augmenting clothing is a woman's trying to move herself up on the 10 scale, which actually exists. I joke all the time about how, 10s are real, but they don't last very long. The fact is that standards of beauty, as much as certain political people with certain political persuasions would like to say otherwise, it is the case that standards of beauty for both men and women, they're based on reality. Now, they're not common in reality. They're not nearly as common as people would like to believe that they are. And therefore, yes, many of the people who approach those ideals of physical beauty, whether it's for men or women, they're on all kinds of drugs and have surgery and personal trainers and full-time chefs and everything else under the sun. It's their full-time job to look like that. Okay, cool. That's true. But there are people out there that actually look like that without any of the fake stuff, without any of the surgery and the whatever, Photoshop. Even if it only lasts a year or two or five, and even if it's one person in 10 million, they exist. We know that. You can prove it. Okay? So there's a difference between trying to make yourself look more like that kind of person and just going off in left field is something that doesn't exist anywhere. This is deeply rooted in this idea of men and women being created in the image of God. It's all supposed to point up to him. And if you're pointing somewhere else, because the thing doesn't actually exist, the attribute, then what are you doing, right? And you see a trend towards this. I won't go into other examples because I don't want to spend too much time on this, but and then as far as body augmented clothing, and I mentioned boyfriend jeans, so let's just do it justice. One very tragic modern impulse is intentional uglification. Intentional uglification. It's happening in men and women. This is not a female thing. But one instance of this, as silly as it may seem, is boyfriend jeans. Because it's an intentional attempt to hide what is uniquely feminine and therefore beautiful in the feminine sense. So wearing pants that are straight up and down that completely hide a woman's figure, that's not feminine, and it hides what is feminine. And it's really bizarre, just from a practical perspective, that anyone would go out in public like that, even if they're comfortable or whatever the reasons are, because why would you make yourself look worse? And that's what you're doing. And it seems like a minor thing, but it's one of these things, and there are many, many, many things like this. that obviously go far afield of physical appearance, but where the, a more accurate picture of the motives and the outcomes would yield much stronger feelings than normal people have. So this is why, not boyfriend genes. Boyfriend genes are not why, but this concept, this principle, is why Jesus cleared out the temple and whipped everybody and threw over tables. And everybody's like, man, this dude's nuts. Everyone except the priests. Because the priests could have intervened. That was their domain. They had police. They could have intervened. And the people would not have stopped them because the people were having their tables turned over and getting whipped. So why didn't they intervene? Because they knew what he was doing was right. They were the ones who were charged with the task of making sure what it had turned into never got that far in the first place. They didn't do their job, and they knew they were guilty of that. And so they let him turn over the tables and whip people. Do this crazy thing without doing a thing. Imagine if you went to, well, let's not go there because I don't want to be accused of something that I'm not actually trying to say, but I mean, imagine if a criminal was doing crime, was committing crime, and a bunch of cops just stood around saying yeah, well, we should have done this already. You know, like a vigilante Batman kind of guy. And the cops are just like, yeah, well, he's doing the right thing. We should have done that already. That's what it was like. Anyway, so don't think that extreme positions on things always indicates that the person having them is nuts. They might actually just see more of the picture than you do, or see things more correctly. Or they might actually be nuts. That is definitely a possibility. And in fact, the most likely outcome. But if you just reduce it down to this always means that, you will miss the cases when it doesn't, and those will have much greater value than all the others. Anyway, so back to how women max out allure. What you'll find is that these actions, there are many things that fulfill this description. But one common feature between them is that, or several actually, they will never get better over time. So, a woman can get better at doing makeup, but only so much. And all older women are able to tell you that there came a time where makeup was not sufficient for them to, quote, look how they feel, or look how they feel like they should. So that checks the box. Clothing is the same way. You see women with modern clothing, they're able to look younger for longer because the clothing pushes stuff and squeezes stuff and puts things in other places and whatever. But it hides things. But there comes a time where it can't do that so well anymore, and it fades out in its contributions. And so with all of these things, whatever they might be, again, these are just two examples of many, just to keep it brief. The qualities are that over time, you'll see something like the body overcomes the ability of the mask, which that's a scary thought. Or the person stops, this is big, the person stops caring enough to keep investing the effort to hold up the illusion. So this is well, I'm just going to walk around in sweatpants all day, just the same as I woke up, because I just don't care anymore. Or I'm not going out. The only person that's going to see me is my husband and my kids. And I just don't care. So I'm not going to do it. But I'll put on makeup every time I go to town. So both of these happen. And so the quality here is that aspects of allure, they don't get better over time. And eventually they go the other way. We're going to dive deeper into that. But first I want to make this distinction between the effects of allure on a worldly man versus a high quality man. And here's the axiom that I'd like to give you. A man's value is inversely to a woman. A man's value to a woman is inversely proportional to the power of female allure over him. So his susceptibility to female allure. The less susceptible he is to female allure, the higher the quality he will be. Unless, this is kind of a bimodal distribution, and I don't have this on the slide. If he has turned to apathy in the world and just given up on life, then you could make the argument that he has gone beyond the power of female allure. I would disagree with this significantly, though. I don't have studies to show it, but I would bet that many of those men are frequent users of pornography. And so if you show me some kind of monk, I'll believe you, who's gone his own way, quote unquote, but truly, not just sort of supplanted real women with fake women, then I'll believe that. But anyway, and you could make an argument that a man who's able to just turn away from all of that and do other things, truly, is actually very valuable to a high quality woman. But whatever. Not the point of this video. I guess it's a bit related, actually. Anyway, so the more susceptible a man is to female allure, the lower quality he is. Also, and I'll give you some reasons for that later, if that trips any wires and you're like, wait, what? The number of men who are highly susceptible to allure is high. It's most men. It's almost all men. It's almost all men. And so the further you can get from that, the number of men who fit the bill, they drop very quickly. And so you see this inverse exponential here. And it's the same graph. And that's not a coincidence. Although this is absolutely not the only factor, the susceptibility to allure is a sub-factor of the real factor that makes a man high quality. And that is similarity to God. Do you think that God is susceptible to female allure when all things are before him at all times and all places? Okay. Now I have to illustrate to you what happens. This is one reason why men highly susceptible to allure are lower value to high quality women. To any woman, but high quality women will notice the most. If a man's interest in you is based on allure, what happens is that illusion evaporates, because it will. So potential always becomes actuality. It's just a question of what is achieved. And in most cases, what is expected will not be achieved. Because if a man's expectations of you are based on illusion, then what replaces the illusion is disappointment. If a man's expectations of you are based on true potential, then if you choose to achieve that potential, they will be replaced with actuality and joy and satisfaction. And so this graph is the transition from a normal distribution, which is what the 10 scale is. The 1 to 10 scale that you hear guys talking about. Ladies do it with men, not as frequently. You know, she's an 8, she's a 10. That's the normal distribution. Most people are 5s and 6s. That's a horrible thing for, I should say most women. This is a different presentation. But women do not judge men on, they still have a 10 scale, but it's not normally distributed, it's Pareto. It's Pareto. A woman's view of men's value, at least as a histogram, it's much closer to God's view of the value of men and women. but that's a different presentation. So the normal distribution converts to the Pareto, which, like I said, is closer to the truth, through time and experience. And so women start closer to the right side graph in their view of men. Very, 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 very few men are 8s or better in the eyes of a modern woman. It used to be that women saw men as a normal distribution, but all of the trappings of modernity have caused them to approach closer to reality in how they see the value of man, at least as a histogram. The qualities of those values are still very jacked up, but the count of men with them, that's accurate. That's actually pretty accurate. And you hear men complaining about that all the time in the modern world, but that's the way it is. Anyway, men are still stuck on the normal distribution with women. And that is because of what worldly men view in women, which we've discussed in detail in this presentation. It's what they imagine them to be right now and forevermore. And basically 100% of that imagination is based on what? Their present looks. Their present looks as modified by makeup and clothing and dark lighting, whatever. With the club, whatever. And so looks are normally distributed. That is a biological fact. Looks are normally distributed. If you just look at physical beauty, that is a normal distribution. There are very few 1s and 10s. There's a whole lot of 5s and 6s. And even though no woman will call herself a 5 or 6, that's most people, most women. It's most people and most women, looks-wise. So, when you decay a normal distribution into a Pareto, so if there were an animation of this, you'd see those bars move to the left and consolidate. And so the leftmost bar would raise in height as the bars to the right of it drop on an inverse exponential pattern. And that triangle there, that's a zoom in, by the way, because those bars are too low to see. But if you zoom it in, you'll see the same pattern over and over and over again. That's a principle of the Pareto distribution. So this is the best explanation, in my opinion, of why so many marriages are so unhappy. Now, you note that I did not say why so many men are unhappy, although that would also be true, married men. Why so many married men are unhappy is because they married based on the left distribution and they got the right distribution. But it's also why so many marriages are so unhappy. Because as the left transitions into the right, it's not just the man being an island in his misery. So that could go deeper than I want it to, but basically, to abbreviate, a marriage based on or founded on allure does not contain the growth that one founded on potential. And I should back that up. A marriage based on female allure will not attain the growth that a marriage based on female potential does. A marriage based on female allure guarantees that that woman is marrying a bonehead. And so the inputs to the system are very meager. It's no surprise that the outputs will also be meager. But also the process itself generates very little improvement. Because the man wasn't maximizing for improvement, for potential. He was maximizing for actuality. And it was illusory actuality. It was an illusion. It wasn't real actuality. And so the whole thing was just a sham from the start. And of course they're both going to be miserable. The woman tried to get a man she didn't deserve. She ended up with a bonehead because that's a puzzle you cannot solve. And then he had his own negative outcomes to deal with. So in conjunction, of course, misery plus misery equals misery squared. So the plus turns into a multiply. All right, so what about the real deal, the real thing that men should be angling for, and the real thing that women should know that they have? Um, so let's talk about godliness, real feminine godliness. Now, most of these qualities will be future. They will be potential. They have seeds when the man meets the woman, but they will only grow to the extent that the environment is provided and the woman makes the choice. And it's because life's experiences are what cause these things to grow. It requires choice, but that's the environment required. So they're necessary but insufficient. The sufficiency requires her choice as well. These are to beautify, which means to improve the appearance of, to enliven, which means to make more entertaining, interesting, and appealing, to enhance, which means to improve or make more valuable, to excite, which means to cause feelings of enthusiasm and eagerness, to enrich, which means to improve or enhance the value of, to uplift, which means improve the spiritual, social, or intellectual condition of, to gladden, which means to make glad, to mollify, which means to calm and soothe, and to pacify, which means to bring peace to. So to make it colored in crayon simple, a woman can make things worse, no different, or better. All of these things, that's the palette of better. Another way of summarizing this in completely different terms, but it's the same idea, is that a woman's potential is to increase the value of the sacrifice of the ideal man. Now that's an interesting thought. So in the temple, it was the priests who washed the sacrifice, who salt the sacrifice, who actually make the sacrifice. In terms of killing the animal is the one that provides the sacrifice, but the priests kill it. In a sense, so that's a masculine role, right? And yet, what do women do? I think you could make a very interesting case about how they wash the sacrifice. Well, that someone brings the sacrifice to them. The sacrifice brings itself to the woman, right? The man brings himself to the woman. And the priest washes the sacrifice, salts the sacrifice, I'm putting it in the wrong order. Washes the sacrifice, kills the animal, preps it, slices it up, salts it, makes it much more than it came as. And that is a very feminine role. That's a characteristically feminine role. Isn't that interesting? There's so much depth to this. Ugh. If we pop back into talking about the Savior, but that's not something that I'd like to do right now. Okay. Sorry, I just wrote myself a note. I don't want to lose that little nugget of revelation. So, a woman increases the value of the sacrifice of the ideal man. Again, just highlighting, this is not any old man. This is not going to work with a worldly man. It'll be totally different. But an ideal man, a godly man, is going to have a place in her and with her where the sacrifice that he makes can be received. That's very important. When we talk about the temple, in ancient times, there was an appointed place where all of these things happened, and it was enclosed. There was a wall around it, and a gate to get in, and special requirements to get in. And a woman is like a temple, and her house is like a temple. I hear descriptions sometimes the house being the man's, and I don't. I mean, uh, how much do I want to get into this? I think a better way of thinking about it is thinking of the house as very much the woman's. It's what she does with what he provides. That's her space to transform it into what is better than what he provides. So the Holy Ghost, we talk about male and female roles as aspects of the divine. The Holy Ghost is known as the comforter, but the Holy Ghost has a lot more functions than just comforting. The Holy Ghost also augments. It is an augmenter. That's one definition of quicken, is to make something better than what it was. The improver. But I like the word augment. I think it's got a little bit more grit to it. So we all know what squalor men are happy living in, and a good woman comes along and turns a place into a palace. Even if it's a little palace or an inexpensive palace, doesn't matter. That heart that's somehow injected into the situation, is a woman makes a house a home. So that's just one very literal fulfillment of giving a place. There are others. Having a baby is giving a place where that sacrifice would be received, quite literally. Okay? The quality and quantity of what that sacrifice is transformed into. That's another way she increases the value of the sacrifice of the ideal man. So let's say that I have $100, and you ask me what that $100 is worth. I'd say whatever I can buy with it. So let's say that, Jack and the Beanstalk situation 1, I've got $100 and I go buy 3 beans, and they're not magical beans. Well, I could have purchased a whole lot more than 3 beans with $100. I got ripped off, and now I have corrupted the value of that $100, or polluted my inheritance, to use a scriptural phrase, a very rich one that points to many important ideas. So you could be the most amazing man in the world, but if it doesn't make any difference in the world, who cares? Are you really amazing? And who cares if you're amazing anyway? The only reason it would matter is, what difference does it make in the lives of other people? It's the only thing that matters. So the value of a man is how much of a difference he can make in the world. The value of a woman is, to a great extent, she's the one that decides, right? What she does with his sacrifice will be what decides the effect he has in the world, to a great extent. And you might think, well, you could separate that out into what effect he has on her, and then what effect he has on the world. I contend that that's a much more related relationship than you're saying, than you're thinking. Because what effect is a man going to have on the world if his home life is living hell? He will be so consumed in that he will not be able to do hardly anything out in the world compared to what he could if she was just, remember the 3 types, they make it worse, they make it the same, and they make it better. If she was just making it the same, she was just not getting in his way, not detracting from him, he'd be a much better man. And then if she was actually providing him with greater meaning than he would otherwise have, just think how much more he will have to give the world. It's such a simple idea, it's so obviously true. Okay, now let's go back to the $100 and say you get 3 magic beans that you climb up the vine, and there's all these treasures and a heroic journey that changes you forever, and you end being a hero and a multimillionaire, or let's adjust for inflation and say a multi-billionaire. Well, I mean, you got an awful lot for your $100, and that's the difference a woman can make. The man's sacrifice, it's the same man either way. He brings the same amount to the table in terms of the inputs to the sacrifice. The process of the sacrifice could be very different. But what he produces as a result could be tremendously different because of her. I think some of the most important aspects of the how a woman increases the value of the sacrifice of an ideal man is her improvement and her joy. So the whole world could burn down to ashes. But if you have loved a woman and you've made a difference in her life, that's all that will matter. It will be enough. It will be more than enough to answer the question, how could any of this be worth it? That's what a quality woman does. She's capable of doing that by herself, even if the entire world is hell itself. This is, of course, only true for quality men, but because they're the only ones that will see it, which is the point we're about to get to. But that's what a high quality woman can do for a man. And it's very important to see that this is very different than where we started with the illusion, the magical woman who never ages and always is exactly what you want and nothing else. This is all about her improvement, her joy, not the goodies you get, not your joy. So again, we underscore this fact. And then there's her impact on the world. Now, with all these things, it's difficult to straddle the reality where on one hand, we should preach the ideal and help show the importance of it so that those for whom the decisions are still future will have the incentive to make the correct choice and pay the required price. Because if you didn't say how good it really was, they wouldn't. And if you didn't show that it was an option, they wouldn't. And then on the other hand, we deal with the other side of reality, which is that for most people, they don't have the ideal. And for most of them, it's too late to get it. Or they never could in the first place because of whatever circumstance. And so it's very important to stress that in God's plan, there's overflowing value no matter where you are and what you've done. That's very important and true. So, when we talk about her impact on the world, I think most minds would go to what she does outside the home. I put that as number 3 here. The first and most important is what he does because of the meaning she provides him. That's going to rustle some feathers, but it's true. What he does because of the meaning she provides him. I would make a strong argument that what a man can do with a high quality woman by his side is much greater, out in the world, is much greater than what a high quality woman could do out in the world with a high quality man by her side. I think that if you're maximizing outputs, I just don't understand how anything can hold a candle to the ideal, which is a high quality woman doing her high quality, achieving her high quality potential in the walls of her home, and a man filling that up because of what she provides him and overflowing out into the world. So, obviously, a huge part of that is what she does with her children. And that will be, hopefully, at least in part because of what he provides her, I guess genetically at a minimum, but hopefully in the not just the environment, but the strength and consistency and support that he provides, and opportunities for improvement, and then what she does outside of the home, if there's anything left that can flow to that. And obviously, when you talk about, if you think about the Colorado River or similar situations, people are pulling water out of it as it goes downstream. Whatever's left at the bottom is what's left, right? In this case, so if suddenly the cities above upstream stop taking water out of the river, there's a lot more left at the end. And that's great. And you can use it for all things that water can be used for at that point. And so that's where if, the home life of a lady doesn't end up being what she had hoped it could be, and she has all this left over, or if it's just so dang amazing that she has a whole lot of water left over, that can also happen, and that's great. And that's great. So, but it's not the first use of the water. And that's a huge temptation for modern ladies, and it always goes badly. I almost always. Let's leave a little space there for the fact that reality is complex, and there are always exceptions to rules. So you might be saying, okay, but what's a man's purpose? Well, it's to be like God. Pretty straightforward, not so easy, but pretty straightforward. So that entails learning what God is like and becoming like him. It also entails to find the joy he does in loving others as he loves them. And this is important to stress because a lot of times we talk about these topics, there are a few ladies who say, well, that doesn't sound fair to me. Well, if you had any idea what it consisted of, you'd understand that it's not the more desirable of the two options, unless you actually happen to be quite a bit like God already. Because who wants to sacrifice themselves completely for others? And that's what it takes. To actually find greater joy in the joy of other people than you would doing whatever else you would do otherwise. So a woman's purpose is very different. It's complementary. A man's purpose is to be like God. A woman's purpose is to receive and value what God is like. Not what God like. What God is like. That means to experience and enjoy what God is like through her husband and all he enables within and outside of her. So what if your husband's a bonehead? Or what if you've used up what he's got to give you? Or what if he doesn't give you enough? Or what if you don't have a husband? Or the water flows downstream. Use it. You can receive and value what God is like through things other than a husband. It's just that an ideal husband is the best way to do that once you're ready to perceive, receive, value, and live according to it. Before then, a not ideal husband or anything else in the world is the best way to do this. Because you still have to learn a lot about that value and what to look for and how to receive it and why to receive it and how to live up to it and why. And the best way to do that is with less than the ideal. Because the ideal will take away most of the learning opportunities. You'll already have the outcomes that come, but none of the joy, or very little of the joy that is meant to come with it, because you have the outcomes, but not the desire. You don't see the value, and you don't appreciate it. And that goes both ways, okay? Which is really important and a fantastic segue to where we're going next. There are many cases where a woman is with a man who she doesn't deserve. And there are many cases where a man is with a woman that he doesn't deserve. And in all of, well, it's strange, but you'll find that when a man is with a woman he does not deserve, he tends to be utterly clueless about the fact that she is so high quality. When a woman is with a man that's better than what she deserves, she's usually oblivious, but the guy knows. And so it's this weird reversal. I guess mirror image in this case. Yeah, I'd have to diagram this out, but I think that's a mirror image. So, but there was a difference I wanted to get to. Let me just think about this for a second because it's worth saying. When the guy is better, he almost always knows it. When the woman is better, she almost always knows it. The difference is when the guy is better, the woman knows it too. Is that true? And then when the woman is better, the guy is clueless about it. Well, I'm going to contradict myself. I don't buy that. I think it's the same situation. You just swap the genders. And the reason I think that is because, yeah, what I think is true is that when the man is better than the woman, it's much more likely that the woman, knowing fully well that he's better, will reduce it down to them being equal. That's the difference. And she knows she's lying. Whereas when the woman is better, the man is oblivious to anything better than what he gives. This would be a good diagram. Anyway, I'm not sure how relevant it is to this, except for this very important piece, which is if you are with a man and you are the better of the two, he absolutely positively will not see or appreciate all the ways that you're better than him. And that sounds really weird, but we all want to be valued for who we really are, especially if what we have to give is good. Especially if what we have to give is good. Otherwise, it's just sort of going down the drain. You can't have joy in what does not have perceived value. So you can't give joy to another, even if the qualities are good, in ways that they do not perceive and value. This is a gift given that doesn't seem like a gift and isn't very valuable to them. It's like giving someone $100 and they use it as toilet paper. That's what it's like. So that's not fun. Whereas if a man marries a woman and finds out that he's bringing more to the table, that's just par for the course. It's the way it's going to be if things work out the way they're meant to. So, anyway. So I promised a segue, here it is. So the differences over time matter a lot between a woman who chooses a man who's worldly versus a woman who chooses a man who is godly. It's going to matter a lot increasingly over time. A worldly man front loads all of his treatment of you. So I was commenting before about how somewhere around the first date, a woman's probably the most excited she's ever going to be in a relationship. The man is going to treat the woman better on the first date than he ever will after that in the case of a worldly man. In the case of almost every man, a woman will never be treated better than she is on the first date. She will never be appreciated more. She will never be adored. Remember we talked about that? He will never, what does it mean to see someone as godly? she will never be as appreciated or as viewed as close to the divine feminine, the divine goddess, as she is on the first date. That is the way of the world. It's all downhill from there. So it better be really, 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 really good, because all you're going to have is some decayed version of that for the rest of your life that always gets worse. Now, women get sucked into this. It's like a job that pays terribly, but they give you a sign up bonus, and you have to do the math on that. It's much better to have a job where you keep getting raises. So he front loads all of his value for you, which is based on illusion, and that suckers you into preferring men who do this. You say, like, wow, this guy, he's all about me. He'll do whatever I want. Okay. What about tomorrow? What about next week? What about next year? What about 5 years from now? And men and women can make this mistake, and they can make it in many other ways as well with each other, like basing someone on their physical looks today versus what they're going to look like long term. And we'll get into that. Although we're almost out of slides, we just have 3 more. So how he treats you, a man of the world, it's going to decay as his expectations turn into disappointments. And they will. You absolutely will never live up to his expectations of you. Because he's not picking you based on your actual ability to fulfill divine potential. He's picking you on how well you fool him into thinking you already have achieved that divine potential. And you haven't. So anyone using that metric, this is what's going to happen. It's going to decay over time. It's going to get very bad. And according to the magnitude of the difference between what he sees in you and what is actually there, that's how great that change is going to be, and it will all transform into your misery over time. That's what it's going to convert into. Now women seem to know this instinctively, at least on some level, because when you go on a first date with a guy and he treats you like $1 million, you don't like him. You don't like him. And maybe you can't describe why, but you will not go on another date with that guy. And this is actually, it's kind of kryptonite for quality men, because quality men will also treat you very well, but it will be based on completely different reasons. And those reasons will only go away if you turn out to be a knucklehead in terms of response to invitations to improve, whether given to you by life, through your own thoughts, experience, or through him. So the key distinction with a godly man is he's going to treat you exactly how you deserve to be treated. And contrary to what the world teaches, that is not to treat every single woman like the divine goddess. It's not. It's to treat her like she has the potential to become the divine goddess, which is absolutely contextualized on who she is right now. So the treatment is to look at a woman and see who she really is right now, and then to draw a line to who she really could be, and then to treat her such that she's most persuaded to take the next step in the direction the line points. And that is exactly what God does with all of us, with men towards the divine masculine and with women to the divine feminine. And that's how godly men and women also act. So, as a consequence, here's the big differentiator. A godly man is not going to be over the moon ridiculously, puppy dogging on your first date. He's going to be excited. He's going to have a good time. But all of that is going to be tempered by his knowledge of what is actually in existence and how much of what he hopes for is unactualized potential that frankly is astronomically unlikely to become fulfilled in anyone. Just like it would be absurd for all women to assume that all men are the ideal husband, right? Wouldn't that be a ridiculous thing to assume? It'd be dangerous, downright stupid, right? And yet, pretty much all men will assume that any attractive lady, any lady they find attractive, is the divine goddess herself. So, if you'd think that enough smacks to the face by life would wake a guy up, but very, very, very few men realize this. And you see it in the number of men that have been divorced 3 times and they're out dating again. And they get married again. So there's your proof. So some people will say things like, well, I think this guy values women a lot less than he should because he's not treating them like they're the divine goddess. Well, is it that his valuation is flawed or that the world's valuation is flawed? And again, it's enticing to women to be treated better than they should be. Although, like I said, there seems to be some comfort threshold because if it's too over the top, she'll balk at that and feel very uncomfortable and not want to go back. But this is why we're speaking of corruptions of what would otherwise be good ideas. This is why women like the bad boys. They treat them like garbage because they know that deep down inside, they're probably closer to garbage than divine right now. At best, they're empty. At best, they're empty. But in practice, they probably have some garbage in them by now that needs to be gotten rid of. So when the bad boys treat them like garbage, they're like, well, this will never get worse at least. And I'm not on the hook to put on the show because whether they think this or not, he sees me for who I really am. That's not actually what's going on. He just doesn't care about anybody. He neither sees, he does not impute the illusion of the divine goddess to you, as all the simps do, the countless multitudes of simps, but he also does not see your potential. So that one isn't addressed in the slides, but the bad boys are a really bad idea, always, because they will never see value in you. They will always treat you like garbage. The simps treat you like a queen before you ever are one, but that will decay too and turn to bitterness and misery. The godly men, you'll start at the bottom and go up from there. And that's the place you want to be. That's the place you want to be. I think I mentioned in another video, but I overheard a mom talking to another mom. She had an older teenage daughter, actually a girl in her 20s, a lady in her young 20s, not teenager anymore, young 20s, and she went on a date with a much older man by the world's standards. Wouldn't have been anything to bat an eye at 20 years ago. Just so you know, this wasn't like a 50-year age gap or something like that. And she's like, well, one thing she said, I mean, he's amazing in every way, except she kind of felt like, how did she put it? I'm going to corrupt what she said. She kind of felt like he didn't see her as his equal. And it was like, what do you mean? No, everything was fine. It's just like, he's had all this experience in life and he's got this awesome career and he owns a house and, he's got the Nobel Prize in literature, but of course I'm being a little facetious. But she felt like he didn't see her as his equal. And I'm like, because she's not. If he's successful and 10 years ahead of her in life and he's got all these worldly accolades that do mean something, it's not some crazy thing, and who cares? But all the things she's actually looking for in life to maximize, and her side of the equation is, I'm young and I haven't lived life yet. That's the value she's bringing to the table, is potential. Potential. Which is valuable, guys. That is the equivalent of masculine achievement is female potential. That's the balance of the equation. But why? I mean, how can that be a downside? It's like, well, of course she's not his equal. She can come up to that, but that's a process, right? A process he's probably ideally a part of. In the perfect world, that's the way it works. So women choose men who have already achieved massive growth so that they have a place where they can do the same. And this is how men exercise that feminine practice in religion, where we seek Jesus, who has already achieved much more than we have. That's an understatement. And we intend to achieve a lot of what he did in the place he prepares for us. So there's the pattern. Anyway. So, of course, he's going to treat you as if you have less value than what the world treats you, than as the world treats you. Because you do have less value than what the world would have you believe. You're not the divine goddess. You have the potential to become her. And you don't want to be in a situation where someone thinks you already are her. It's going to go very badly. Now, here's the good news. I think that's good news too, but most people won't see things the way I do. That's fine. Here's the thing that you could see as good news, a little more likely to see. None of his expectations are based on things that lie outside of your choice. Those other guys, the bad boys and the simps, everything they want, much of it lies outside of anything you can do anything about. You will never measure up to what they want. You're never going to be happy being treated like trash, like the bad boy's going to do. You're never going to be happy with that. You can never measure up to what he wants. And with the simp, he thinks that you're an illusion. And as that illusion fades away, he's going to be miserable and you will be too. And there's nothing you can do to stop that. You can never measure up to that, because by the time you figure it out, you will already have destroyed his illusion. You can't get it back. You can't get it back. Nothing you become 10, 15, 20 years from now will ever give him back those 10, 15, 20 years. This is very important to understand. Again, this is a false tradition pushed by modern Christianity that all of your sins can not only be forgiven, but their effects erased. And that second part is not true. It's not true. So the things you bring into this world, they grow legs and run away. Or don't bring into this world, they die forever. Opportunities, they don't come back. They're always different, and they're usually less. Anyway, so it's very important to find someone that sees you how you really are, and also sees who you could really be later. And I'm going to bifurcate that. I'm going to fork it into two different tracks in the next slide. But to conclude this point, as you choose to do the best you know, that's all it takes, is just do the best you know all the time. And you're like, well, dang, that's a high standard. Yeah, but it's God's standard. It's if this is a godly man, he's not asking you to do something he has not already done and continues to do at a much higher level than you. And that's what it takes to abide with him and fulfill the ideal together, is to live up to the best that you know. Not the best he knows, not the best that God knows, not the best that your neighbor knows, just you. And as you do that, his joy in you will grow every single day. And that is the greatest blessing that you can find in marriage as a woman, or whatever leads you most directly to that here or hereafter. Just to include all those people who say, I'm on a different track and there's nothing I can do to get on the track you're talking about. No, actually, wherever you are on this track. The question is, where are you on it? And are you going to respond to the opportunities you have in whatever your present situation in order to move closer to it? You should look up the story of Abigail in that regard. Although I am not at all implying that, like Abigail, your husband's going to keel over and die and then God's going to hook you up with a really high quality man in his place. That's not what I'm implying, so please don't think that. But I'm saying she demonstrates the correct attitude, an exceptionally good attitude, very admirable person, that all women in situations that they wish were different could emulate and would be good to do so. Okay, let's talk about how worldly and godly men and worldly women see current and potential female value. And so for these two slides, the left pane is what the world, men and women who are worldly, see in a given woman. So this is going to include how worldly women see themselves. And then on the right, what a godly man sees in a given woman. And by given, I just mean pluck a random woman out of the crowd, and this is the pattern that is going to be true. So the principles that this picture is based on are as follows. You can only see what God sees to the extent that you are like him. So what a godly man sees is closer to what could actually be than what anyone else would see. He knows how to get there because that's part of the picture, and he has what it takes to enable it. That's also part of the picture. All of that comes together with being more like God. And so if you see more of what God sees, you are also more like him. And all of these things come together. So what does the world see in a woman? Well, in this diagram, the silhouette is her physical beauty. That's what that represents. Then we have her mind, her heart, and a barbell, which could variously mean her strength, her vigor, her energy. And if you are or know a woman, hopefully all of those things make sense. So what the world sees in a given woman is that she has already achieved her potential. She's already perfect in every way. Now, in this picture, the heart is bigger than the mind and the strength because, in my opinion, I think the world accentuates that. What the world sells as female intelligence, I don't buy. I've known, I think, an exceptional number, and by that I mean I'm very grateful for all of the ones I have known, and I think I've been lucky and that are blessed in that regard. But I've known women who have exceptional intelligence, and there is something about that intelligence that lies beyond me as a man. I don't fully understand this. It's something that I'm still learning a lot about from God. But one thing I know, it is immensely valuable and immensely invisible to pretty much every person I've ever met. And so that's kind of exciting. It's quite a mystery. But there is a thing called female intelligence, and it does differ from what I would call male intelligence. And I'd say what the world sees as intelligence is either male intelligence or a watered down version of it, so reducing it to book facts and figures, which is much less than what it is in actuality. But unfortunately, women are told, and men are told, that that female intelligence is this same watered down male intelligence that I spoke of, and that they are smart if they have it and they are dumb if they don't have it. I've met the most, what I would say is intelligent women who also think that they are idiots. Like truly, truly deeply think that they are stupid. And it's not based on lack of confidence or something. It's based on this illusion that the watered down masculine intelligence is female intelligence. And so they're blind to the female intelligence they have, which in the case of the people I'm thinking about is off the charts. Off the charts. And then I also know women who are deep into, they can perform very well on what I would call male intelligent tasks. So it's, and have very high female intelligence. Very, very high. So that's just a little dip of how these things react and co-occur. But anyway, there is a thing called female intelligence. And so the brain is small here because that is not something that's really valued by the world, female intelligence, whether it's my definition of female intelligence or just the neuter definition of intelligence, which is actually the watered down male version. So I think that people focus on the heart. That's long story short. The looks in the heart and the strength to varying degrees. So that, because energy is in there, that's like the let's go have fun, let's go dancing, whatever kind of piece. Whatever. We don't have to parse this infinitely. You get the point. We don't have to be so uptight about where the boundaries are between these qualities just to say that they differ and there are important things in them. So the current is the same as the potential in the way the world sees it. This is obviously ridiculous at every level. So what does a godly man see? Well, this is interesting. So he sees potential in improvement in her looks. This is a sort of a dead giveaway. It's not unique because you do have people who are like, well, you can never be good enough looking and you'll never please me kind of attitude. But a godly man sees potential for improvement pretty much everywhere he looks. And so what you see here is the gradient, the lightened silhouette. When he first meets a young lady, and that's a key factor here, when he meets a young lady, he will see that she's on a curve where she actually has potential to be even more attractive physically. And he will see immense growth potential in her intellect, and he will not see her current heart features, again, just generalizing this, just zooming out a bit to avoid details. He won't see how she is right now as the max of how she could be in any aspect, basically. That's what I'm trying to say, that she will come into, or could come into, much greater potential across the board. And he knows how to get there, and he's willing to pay the price it will require for him to help her do it. Didn't intend to spend that long on that slide. Let's see if we can do this one faster. So what about current and future female value? That's different than potential. Now the gradient is not her effort over time, it's just time. It's just time. So a godly man has a better idea of reality, which is things as they really are and really will be. And that really will be is really important. A godly man is also intelligent and honest. He can look around and see what happens to women over time. If a man isn't willing to openly talk about these things, he's either a moron or he's trying to manipulate people. Those are the only two reasons a man wouldn't openly discuss age in women or female aging. So every single man who talks about this will take much more flack than the compliments he receives or the thank yous he receives from the ladies or men who benefit from him speaking up about it, but it still is the right thing to do. It's true. And we ought to speak the truth. A lot of problems exist in this world because normal people are not willing to say what they believe and have reasons to believe and believe is true. So here's the hard facts in the briefest terms I can give them to you. The world expects a woman to stay exactly the same as she is for the rest of her life. However, that changes dramatically through time. The bluntest way I can put it is that grown women are old women for half their adult life, if not more. Now you can do the math on the age ranges there, but that's in the best case. In the best case, it's 50-50. In most cases, it's worse than that. And this is something that we just need to be a lot more honest about. The other thing we need to be a lot more honest about is there is a lie that says that beyond the first lie, which I didn't state, which is that women do not become old until they're really old, age-wise, till advanced age. It's not true. It's not true. And I'll give you some stats in a second. It's all just very condensed and brief. The other lie is that we're only talking about outward physical appearance. That is not true at all, and I think this is an even bigger lie than the first one, and it causes massive harm to men and women. Massive harm. Everyone needs to understand that a woman's life is an hourglass that has several phases, which is an hourglass only has one, but there's several phases in a woman's life. And that last phase exists and is long. And so we pretend it doesn't exist or that it's a social construct or whatever. But then if you can get people to admit it does, they try to say it's very brief, which is a lie, and that it's only physical outward appearance, which is an absolute lie. And these are all things that have been shown quite clearly in scientific studies. Okay? So, what do I mean by that? To oversimplify the whole situation, we're just going to talk about menopause. There are many other phases of difference in a woman's life. This is definitely the biggest one. No one talks about menopause. No one. Now, just to root this in the purpose of the video, what we're talking about is seeing women as they actually are and seeing their potential for what it actually is, and why that's a good thing, and why women should seek men who openly acknowledge these things, because it will be best for them over the long term. No one talks about menopause. Okay? Now, who should be talking about this? Older ladies. Why don't they talk about it? Because they see themselves as in competition with younger ladies. And it hurts to admit that certain doors are forever closed because you have to contend with the decisions you made during those periods of life. And most women don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. And most people, whether they're male or female, care more about themselves than others. And so even if there's a tremendous cost in keeping truth from other people or openly lying about it, they will do it for the smallest increment of personal gain. That's a human quality. And one particular manifestation of this is women not talking about menopause. They don't talk about it with their daughters. They don't talk about it with their granddaughters. Men don't talk about it because they're afraid of the punishment that will come to them if they do. But they ought to be talking about it with their daughters and their sons and their grandsons and their granddaughters as well. Because a man needs to know what he's walking into as far as the phases of a woman's life. It's the cost benefit is completely, the equation, the estimate, the cost benefit is completely messed up. And so, of course, you're going to have a miserable marriage when you think you're getting A, but it's actually B or C or D. Okay? So, without further ado, 30% is the magic number. That is what you will see in the lab analyses of a woman's decrease in energy and brain power after menopause. 30% for life. So a lot of times in these videos, I talk about a gradient, which is a ramp, to describe changes in things over time. And then I'll say it's a ramp with spikes. So you get a gradient with impulses. So it's like a line with slope, but then sudden jumps throughout the line of varying height, but it's an all of a sudden change. Now, menopause usually isn't an all of a sudden change. We'll talk about that in a second. But it's a spike because it's a 30% drop in all of these qualities: heart, might, mind, energy. All of these things are going to drop. So imagine being with a person and then, quote unquote, all of a sudden, they drop by 30 points in IQ for life. Do you think that that's going to make a difference in your life, in your relationship? Especially if that person was not taught these things and did not expect them, and therefore when they happen, she thinks you're perpetually gaslighting her because she's gone into Dunning-Kruger world. And you're the one. It's like you went into a time machine and out into space, and you came back, and many years have passed on the ground, but you're still the same person you were yesterday. That's what it's like. And many men experience this. But we can all see it happening. But we pretend we don't see it. We pretend that old ladies came from some magical place and they're separate beings from young women, that there's no line of continuity between the two. And it's ridiculous. It's harmful. Okay, so let me just spit some more facts at you. And I put the citation here. It's just one website. You go to any you want. This is from menopause.org. It's not like ultra right-wing, women-hating Nazis.org or something, right? Most women experience menopause between ages 40 and 58. All those times people are telling you age is just a number, it's a societal construct. Look at these clothes and surgeries and makeup that we can wear and still look like we're 30. 30's not old. 35's not old. Life's just beginning. You can be in your prime at 35. Oh yeah? Most women experience menopause between ages 40 and 58. And after that age, between 40 and 58, pick a year. The average is 51, by the way. So if we have to reduce it down to 1 year. Imagine, well, you don't have to imagine, but the fact is that women, when they hit 51, there are exceptions, but the rule is 30% less brain power, less energy, less interest in pretty much anything, poorer mood, way less libido, all this stuff, all these qualities that you've come to characterize this lady as, poof, gone, forever, right? At 51. And if she's going to live till 80, that's 29 years. 29 years. And so when did you get with her? When did you get married? Was it 29 years before 51? Probably not. It's probably later than that. Okay? With the world today. And so more than half the time you're with her, she will be in this state. And for all those that would say, well, it doesn't matter, you're being superficial, whatever. I don't know how someone's actual character can be a superficial attribute. I mean, their intelligence level, their energy level, their mood, what they're like, that's much more than just what they look like. If that's not qualitative, I don't know what is. Like if that doesn't matter. So, um, and it's never better. It's always less and it's always worse. So if you think that doesn't matter, I present this question to you. If women aged in reverse, at what age would they get married? If they started at adulthood in menopause and they ended at 51 and then underwent all the hormonal changes and reversals that they go through at menopause, but in reverse, I guarantee you that none of them would be dated before they turned 51. No one would date anyone before 51. They'd wait till all that stuff worked out and then they would date the ladies. And so the physical attraction is the carrot that gets guys into this. And thank God for that, right? Thank God for that, because there wouldn't be kids otherwise. Okay, but we're not done with the facts. So that 51, that's when menopause starts. And menopause is the completion of another phase, which is called perimenopause. Menopause is not process, it's a conclusion. Perimenopause can last for 4 to 8 years. It does last. It's not can. It does last for 4 to 8 years. That's the average band. So if the average age of menopause is 51, subtract 4 to 8 years from that. And that's the average when it starts. So if you thought 51 was young, subtract 4 to 8 years from that. Okay? So if you've got someone who's 47, that's not an old person, right? According to the world, that person's still young. If a man's 47 and he's in shape, that is still very young. Not young, but you're not old. You're not young, but you're not old. You can still lift heavy things and go on hikes and run and lift heavy weights and take care of young kids and father kids at 47. You can't really have kids anymore if you're a woman. Okay? That's kind of goes part and parcel with menopause. But regardless, so 46, it all changes, okay? Ish, 46, but there's an 8 on that range. So that's 44. I'm sorry, 47 and 45. So 45. Okay, 45. But women can experience menopause as early as 40, and it happens. It's not some freakish thing like having quadruplets naturally. It happens. Women have go through menopause, they complete perimenopause as early as 40. So what's 4 to 8 years before that? So the danger zone for all this, it doesn't start at 51. It doesn't even start at 40. It can start at 32. That's unlikely, but it's totally possible. 32. That's the beginning of the end of the safe range. 32. So there are ladies who, infertility is a very complicated thing, but age-related infertility can begin that young. And this is why. That's perimenopause. Okay? So if the world's telling you, look, you're a viable candidate for marriage as a lady up until your early 30s, only to a moron of a guy, I would submit that unless you're a low-quality woman looking for a low-quality man, well, whether you're low quality or not, if you're a woman looking for a low-quality man, sure, you can still find a guy to marry you at 30, at 35. Still today, I think it's getting harder and harder, but you could find any old guy that will marry you, sure. But is it a guy you'd want to be with? No, absolutely not. Are there exceptions to the rule? Sure, there are. But do you want to bank on the exception? I mean, would you not do anything to prepare for a career in life on the odds that maybe you'll win the lottery? What if you're not even playing the lottery, right? Because most women aren't actively searching for high quality men. They just live their lives and hope one comes along. So why would you sit around and play and not even play the lottery and assume, well, that's the way I'm going to get all my money. I don't have to work. I don't have to prepare for the future. I'm just going to win the lottery without even playing. And that's how bad it is. Okay, I think we've beat that horse. So, um, what's worth accentuating here then is that you better be with a guy who's not looking for this. That's the highlight of this. If you know that the guy already knows the jig is up, he knows how this works. He knows what's going to happen between, you know, mid 30s and 58 years old. He knows what he's in for. He knows what he'll have thereafter. And he's okay with that. He's signing the contract having read all the fine print. And he's happy about it. He would rather do no other thing. Then that's the guy you want to be with. Not the guy who thinks you are forever young and you'll never change, and if you do, you'll only get better. That guy is going to be miserable and you will be miserable too. Okay? That's the point. To summarize all of this, if we break this down to this figure of an hourglass, so we talk about women in hourglass figures, we're going to use a figure of an hourglass to talk about a woman. So on the left side, we have a woman's worth in the eyes of the world, which is the hourglass is full, the top half has all the sand in it, and the worth is measured as the ability of the hourglass to keep all the sand in the top. Of course, this is a fool's errand because there is a hole, and the sand flows through based on time, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. But a woman's worth in the eyes of a godly man is he's trying to maximize how much better things will be once the sand flows through. When it's all said and done, knowing fully that the sand's going to end up at the bottom of the hourglass, he wants to find a woman where the greatest possible improvement in the world happens as a result. So again, going back to the Jack and the Beanstalk with the $100, the sand's the $100. And high quality men, what they're looking for is a transaction that maximizes what that $100 turns into. Now, I guess we haven't said what the sand is. You could apply many things to it and it'll be equally as true. You could say it's a woman's youth. You could say it's the woman's unfulfilled potential because it turns into actuality. You could say it's the man's sacrifice because each of us just has one life to give, right? And so the question is, as we give the life, or as a woman grows older, as her potential turns into actuality, what does it turn into? What have you gotten out of the exchange? You can't stop the sand from flowing through. Every man will give his life. The only question is for what? Every woman will get old. The only question is what she has to show for it. Every woman's potential will fully convert to actuality. The question is how close it came to what it could have been. And that's what we need to understand the real value to be able to maximize.